That's one subject on the front pages, anyway, of the international papers today, aren't they?
What's next for North Korea? That's the question here on the front page of The Guardian. Got some crying residents of Pyongyang there, but the paper reckons inside that the key issue to worry about now is North Korea's nuclear arsenal. Of course, that's a major asset in that government's attempts to sort of make itself important internationally, but it could also be a pawn in an internal power struggle in that country. Now, the paper says we don't quite know whose finger is really on the trigger of North Korea's nuclear arsenal. It might not be Kim Jong-un at all. It could be one of any number of generals and significant political figures in that country. The situation's very murky. And in the case of a power struggle, one of the main ways that we might know that it's going on from outside North Korea would be missile tests and rocket launches and those kinds of signs that whoever's taking over is trying to assert their authority. Now, could that kind of a power struggle be possible? There's an interesting piece in the Daily Beast looking at alternative family rivals that might be trying to take on Kim Jong-un for power in that country. Apparently, he's got an uncle and aunt, Kim Jong-il's sister and her husband, who are known of being very influential in North Korea and apparently have a reputation for making people who annoy them disappear, who might be quite keen to take power from their nephew. And he's also got those two older brothers who've been passed over for power. And that article says they might also be trying to make their voices heard.
And there's a nice cartoon in The Guardian as well, I gather.
Oh, yes, we've got three leaders there in decreasing size. That's his grandfather, his father and himself. And the flags behind them getting bigger and bigger and more troops massing. So it's quite clear what point they're making. As the leader gets and less significant, rather, the military posturing gets larger and larger.
So where does it leave South Korea and, of course, its closest ally, the US?
Well, the New York Times is having a look at this. The first thing they say is that this represents a huge intelligence failure on the part of the South Korean and American spies. The fact that they've only just found out now, that's to say 2 days after he died, that Kim Jong-il has died, shows how little they've been able to penetrate the leadership in North Korea and how closed that regime really is. And they also say in that paper that the relationship between the US and South Korea will be more and more important as time goes on. The US will be worried South Korea might react a bit belligerently to any provocation from the part of the North, and they'll be doing their best to make sure that doesn't happen.
And the paper's also having a bit of a field day, in fact, rounding up odd facts about Kim Jong-il and his successor as well.
There's plenty to say, isn't there? Let's have a look at Gawker's list of Kim Jong-il's most bizarre delusions, they call it. They say that apparently North Korean school children are taught that he was born in a sacred mountain and there was a double rainbow when he was born, and also that he once got in touch with the world's biggest breeder of giant rabbits and imported 12 of them, hoping to breed them to try and help solve the country's food crisis. But apparently he ate them himself for his birthday, according to that breeder. Not to be outdone, the Telegraph has a list of 10 interesting facts about the successor Kim Jong-un, which apparently include that he loves basketball, is a big Michael Jordan fan, and is a fashion icon in North Korea, where young men apparently are queuing up to emulate his haircut.
Could all be true. You never know. We've also been talking about Syria today, going back to serious issues. The regime agreed to allow Arab observers into the country.
Yes, but that's been received pretty cynically by the press. If we look at the Lebanese paper L'Orient Le Jour, their front page is the Assyrian opposition strikes to consolidate. They, of course, met in Tunis yesterday, and the paper reports they're getting a bigger and bigger consensus in how to oppose Assad's regime.
And finally, perhaps not a tyrant, depending on your point of view, but certainly a very controversial leader over 20 years on, Margaret Thatcher, again, polarising politics in the UK.
The Guardian reports she still retains her power to divide. Some Conservative politicians want there to be a Commons debate about the Oscar-tipped new film starring Meryl Streep that's about to come out. They say the film's disrespectful because it represents her looking old and fragile and it shows her Alzheimer's. So they want a debate in the Commons about whether or not this is a respectful way to portray the former Prime Minister. Some Labour politicians, they were also unhappy with that film because they say it doesn't give enough screen time to who they would call the victims of her policies and that it's too sympathetic towards Thatcher. And the film isn't even out in the UK, so I'm sure this controversy is going to run and run.
Have to go and see it here in Paris. All right, Elena, thanks very much. That's Elena with the international newspapers today here on France 24. Headlines once again then. Kim Jong-il's body